Hello, and welcome back to the Watchmaker Studio. I'm so glad you're here because this time we have something pretty special. What we have here is more than just a watch. It's a time capsule. It's an Omega Seamaster calendar reference 2849 SC from the 1950s in a stunning and heavy, solid 18-karat rose gold. And this watch has one hell of a story. This isn't just a random piece from the past. It was sent to me by a good friend. It was his grandfather's watch. His grandfather bought it brand new in the 1950s in Santiago, Chile, and wore it regularly. My friend even sent me a treasured family photo with the entire family gathered in front of a Christmas tree in 1958. And there, on his grandfather's wrist, is this very watch. There's a certain kind of elegance you don't see much anymore. This Seamaster calendar is more than just a watch. It's a family story, a bridge across generations, and a piece of Omega's golden era. Join me while I bring it back to its former glory. So the first thing we need to do is get the watch on Timegrapher to see where it stands today. It's not terrible, but the amplitude is pretty low, and there's definitely a significant difference between the different positions between horizontal and vertical positions. A full service will definitely help here. You know, with this fancy of a watch on the bench, I think we need to class up the joint. Yeah, that'll work. All right, so I'm just checking to make sure the hands are working okay before we get started. And I need to find the slight opening, the slight gap in the case so we can get it open. It's a snapback case. This is gold, so we got to be gentle with it. So I'm going to put a little cover on here, and then I'm going to carefully use my very sharp case knife. There it goes, popped right open. That'll work. Okay, take a look. Oh, wow, look at that. It's gorgeous. It looks like it's had very little, if any, work done. Actually, if I look inside the case back here, there's no marks. So maybe it's hasn't had service, but there's some marks inside of it. So I think there's been some work done to it. But anyway, yeah, beautiful. The beautiful copper that the Omega always has. The oscillating weight seems to be working okay. This is the part that winds the watch for an automatic system. Go ahead and carefully take this off. Okay, and I'm going to carefully pry this off here. Put it off to the side. All right, and in order to get this out, I got to take the crown out, and then there's a couple of case clamps that are screwed down that we need to undo. So I'm just going to carefully unscrew these. And you can see the screws are very nice and polished, so trying to be careful. Don't want to mark them up. Once these case clamps come out, you should be able to easily, the actual movement should just fall right out. So I should be able to turn it over and it should just fall right out. I'm also curious if this is an original Omega crystal. There's one way to tell. What I'll do is when I get the movement out, I'll take a look, see if we can see that. Oh wow, that dial just looks fantastic. Look at that, beautiful. Very nice. So let's see, is this an original Omega crystal? Let's see, yeah. Oh yeah, look, there it is. There's the Omega logo, you can see it. It's in the middle of the crystal. Usually you can't see it with the crystal on, but yeah, it's great. Look at that dial though. Wow. Beauty. I'm gonna put the crown back in here so I'm gonna align the hands and then we can take the hands off. Now we have to take the hands off and dial to get to the motion works and keyless works underneath. This is a somewhat delicate operation. These rose gold hands are thin and bend easily, so I'll use this protective sheet to protect the dial. And with my vintage hand remover that I've polished to a mirror finish, they come off fairly easily and safely. I'll also use wooden tweezers to put them away in a protective case. And with the hands off, we can finally get a good look at the dial. It's creamy off-white with these applied rose gold dart style hour markers. It's stunning and in surprisingly good shape. There's some patina, you know, that gentle aging that collectors love, but no major flaws. It's great news. Now about the loom. The glow-in-the-dark stuff on the hands and the little dots by the markers is radium. It was a standard back then, and yes, it's radioactive. The amount on a watch is minimal and is perfectly safe when it's sealed up in a case. But during a service, you have to be careful. I like my workshop well ventilated, mostly because I don't fancy developing my own personal superpower. But the goal is always to preserve the original loom if we can. It's a huge part of the watch's character. The dial comes off by loosening 2 small screws on the side of the movement, and then once we lift it off, we can see the date mechanism underneath. And I'll put the dial in this protective case as well. And it's actually beautiful under here, just really well finished. And this is actually non-quickset date, by the way, which means that you can't just pull the crown out and change the date. You have to wind the hands forward a full 24 hours for it to advance. It teaches patience, or it teaches you to never let your watch stop, ever. And again, I'll put the date wheel in the same case as the dial to protect it and keep it separate. I don't want anything to rub up against it and accidentally remove any of those numbers. Okay, so now we'll get started on taking the watch apart. So this is the automatic MotionWorks movement mechanism bridge, if you will. So under here are all the gears that will work with in conjunction with the oscillating weight that I took off already to wind the watch as you walk. And so I'll take this bridge off here, and then we'll get to it underneath. You'll notice that I'm also using my bronze tweezers, and that's to make sure I don't scratch any of the movement. This is a beautiful movement. I don't want to put any scratches in it. And steel tweezers would very quickly put scratches in it. Now I can remove the balance wheel assembly. It's really the beating heart of the watch. This is the most delicate part of the whole thing, so we set it aside very carefully. So I'm going to use this tool here to push the click over and hold it open so that I can release the power from the mainspring. Because the last thing you want is for that power to release itself on its own when you remove a bridge or release a screw, because those parts will fly. And these are irreplaceable, tiny little parts, and you don't want them flying into another dimension. Okay, so now let's remove the sweep second cock. Omega calls it a cock. Normally I'm used to a cock only has 1 screw, where a bridge has 2 screws, but that's what Omega called it, so we'll call it that. And then you'll see that the sweep second pinion, so this pinion goes all the way through the watch, and it's actually what the second hand attaches to. And then there's this spring here that applies a bit of tension to it to keep it from moving erratically, to kind of make it spin slowly, but you'll notice that it was a little dirty, so I'll need to address that as well. So now let's remove the ratchet wheel, and you'll notice that it actually has 2 wheels that are sandwiched together, and I'll need to address that a little bit differently as to how I clean it, lubricate it, but I'll show you that. Now, unfortunately, we're going to jump over here to the keyless works because I somehow don't have the footage, like something happened to the footage of where I'm showing me removing the train of wheels. So it's okay, because I have plenty. As I put it back together, I'll talk you through it step by step. So let's remove the setting lever spring, which is actually this larger plate here. It's a little bit under tension. It actually holds down one of the strongest springs in the system that is notorious for flying away, and I'll show you that here in a second. But This is the minute wheel, so we're going to remove the minute wheel and the intermediate wheel. That transfers the power as you spin the crown from that keyless works to the motion works. And there is the yoke spring. Now that is a powerful spring, and that's why I'm using that stick to hold it down, because it will fly away. It has a tendency. And this is the yoke. Okay, so now let's remove this pressure spring that holds the setting lever down. Just remove this one screw and it comes right out. Okay, and then this is the setting lever. And now we can take the crown out. Perfect. Now the winding pinion, the center wheel, and the sliding clutch all fell out the other side. But again, I'll show you all these parts individually as we put them in. And this is the center wheel. All right, let's turn the watch back over. And actually, before I do that, let's tighten up these screws. These are the dial screws that hold on the dial. Let's tighten them up, because if you don't tighten them up, they have a tendency to get lost. So let's make sure to tighten them up. Okay, so now that all the parts are out, we will start the pre-cleaning process. And what I'm doing here is I'm pegging the jewels, and that's basically getting rid of all the old oil residue inside of the wheels. And they get gummed up pretty good. So by doing this, it loosens them up and allows for the cleaning machine to do a better job. And this is an important step. If you get into this hobby, it's crucial for you to do this, because leaving the oil residue in there will result in poor regulation of the watch. The watch will run poorly and it won't ever give you the performance that you want. So it's a really important step. I also need to take apart all of the parts of the automatic winding mechanism. So let's do that now. So we're going to take off this plate here that that covers up the two gears that are part of the automatic movement. So let's do that now. Okay, so we're going to take out the reverser as well. That piece actually allows for how the watch winds in both directions. And I'm also going to peg the jewels in this component as well. Okay, so now let's remove the stop click with axle, as Omega calls it. That keeps the wheels from reversing out. All right. Good, now that that's all apart, I need to clean all of the pivots on all of the wheels. This is a little bit tedious, but I think it's very important. I can see a definite difference in the regulation and how accurately it keeps time when I don't do this. So I try to do it every time. So the other thing that I need to do is I'm looking in here in the pinions that are in the wheels, and some of these have a little bit of gunk in them. So I'm using a fiberglass brush here so that we can get them cleaned up. Again, any of the gunk that stays in the pinions or in the pivots will affect the overall performance of the watch. So let's open up the barrel here so we can get the mainspring out. And I'll push on both sides here, pop it open, there you go. And I'll carefully use tweezers here so that I need to hold down the mainspring and make sure it doesn't pop out as I open it up and remove the barrel arbor. Okay. And now I will pull the mainspring out carefully and then start walking it out of the barrel. There's been a lot of talk from different folks on the really cool sounds in watchmaking. So now I'd like to introduce you to one of the not cool sounds and horrifying sounds in watchmaking. That's right, that was the sound of the barrel flying away, hitting a wall and another wall, and going across the room. Luckily, I was able to quickly find it, so crisis averted. But yeah, hold on to your barrels, folks. And I don't know if you noticed, but there was only a tiny bit of mainspring left, and that little bit of mainspring was enough to fling it across the room. So be careful out there, folks. Again, I'm just cleaning the inside of the barrel, and now I'm going to put the balance cock back into the main plate to protect it while we clean it and put it in the cleaning machine. Now, before we get everything into the cleaning machine, I mentioned that the sweep second pinion was dirty and I want to get it cleaned up, so I've actually put it here on the lathe. And I'm using a burnisher, which is basically just a metal with it's not a file, but it basically rubs the metal basically and polishes it. So I'm just going to use that really quickly here to just clean up that sweep second pinion. All right, and then we got to get everything into the basket, all the small pieces, so that we can then get them into the watch cleaning machine. You know, bringing a movement like this back to life is just an incredible feeling. And it's something I'm really passionate about. This level of detail, explaining what every part does and why we're doing what we're doing, is the kind of stuff I love sharing. If you enjoy this really deep dive kind of restoration and want to help me take on more projects like this, think about joining the community over on Patreon that I just started. You will get early access to videos, behind the scenes stuff, giveaways. I'll also be sharing 3D print files for tools and things related to watchmaking as I create them. And you can even help me decide which watch I restore next. It doesn't cost anything to join, but if you do decide to support the channel, I would be eternally grateful, and you will get a welcome package with Watchmaker Studio stickers. Your support really does make all of this possible. All right, let's get back to our watch. Okay, so let's turn our attention back to the case of the watch, and I'm going to take off this ring here that's holding down the crystal, and this is what's called an armored crystal. So it has basically a ring inside of it that holds it in its shape. So you have to push it out like this with this tool. This is my crystal installation tool and removal tool, and I'm pushing out the crystal here very gently. And by the way, talk about scary sounds. Here's one. Oh yeah, no, it's sounds like it broke, but it didn't break. It's fine. It just, it just sounds that way. A little scary, especially since it's that original crystal, and the last thing I want to do is mess it up. But yeah, very gently pushing it out. Okay, that's the ring I was talking about that makes this an armored crystal. So now let's just go through, and I'm going to use a peg here to, again, get rid of the crusted sort of dirt on here. And so we can do some polishing, and then we will put this in the ultrasonic cleaner and get it all cleaned up. Unfortunately, we can't just throw it into the ultrasonic cleaner because some of this, the dirt that's on here is a little bit built up and kind of stuck on there. So we got to help it along a little bit just by using these wooden pegs. Just loosen all of it up so that it will come off easier into the ultrasonic cleaner. Basically, we're helping the ultrasonic cleaner out. So the spring bars that were on this bracelet actually were kind of cool, kind of vintage. They just looked a little corroded. So let's take them over to the lathe here and let's get them polished up. I'm going to use 1000 grit and then 5000 grit. That's on this sanding stick that I use. And let's see how they turn out. We'll probably also want to use the burnisher as well, just to really get that edge on where the tip is. There we go. Yeah, this looks great. They turned out really well. All right, so next is the crystal. So we need to go to the polishing machine to work on the crystal. I'm going to start with the white polishing compound for the crystal, which is the least aggressive of the polishing compounds. And actually, it looks pretty good. It did a really good job. And I'll also use some polywatch on this at the bench and do the final cleaning of it. So next is the case and the solid gold bracelet. And the goal here is not to make it look brand new. Vintage watch should have some character. So with a soft metal like 18 karat gold, we got to be incredibly careful. So if you polish too aggressively, you're going to remove metal and soften the edges that are those sharp lines on the lugs and on the back. And that's a cardinal sin in vintage watch restoration, punishable by, well, mostly just angry comments on the internet, but still. My approach is a conservative one here. I'm just going to use red polishing compound and cotton buffs and just kind of go through really quickly here and just get rid of the light hazing. The idea is to remove the surface haze and make it look like a well cared for 60-year-old watch, not something that just came out of the factory. Once this is done, we're going to put this all into the ultrasonic cleaner and get it all cleaned up. Get rid of all that compound. Yeah, you can see here how great it turns out. Just a couple of swipes. I always put the polishing compound on the left side of the wheel and go and move, and my movement is from left to right to kind of pick up the polishing compound and then polish it off. And that's the way I do it. And you can see it does a great job. Looks really good. All right, let's get everything in the ultrasonic cleaner and let's get it all cleaned up. And you can see how dirty that water is now. This was clean when I put it in, and yeah, there's a lot of gunk in there. All right, let's focus our attention on the dial. And again, same thing here. This dial is in great shape. I'm just gonna do some light cleaning, just kind of get rid of the dust and some of the just light dirt that's on here. And I'm just using a cotton swab with some distilled water, and that's it. No harsh chemicals whatsoever. All right, so now let's do the same thing with the hands. I'm just going to hold the hour hand here with these hand-holding tweezers. And I'm just going to give them a polish with this Burgeon tool. All right. The hands are in pretty good shape, so just a light polish is all we need to do here. Now the minute hand had a little bit of additional grime on it, so let's put this on the bench block. And let's, again, use a cotton swab with distilled water, and that should be enough. Start with the wet side, and then finish it off with the dry side of the cotton swab and polish up, and you'll see the little bit of grime that's on the gold itself will come right up. There you go. Just like that. And the second hand had developed this really interesting looking patina, which I think looks actually very kind of neat. It looks cool. It's gives it a little bit of sparkle. So we're just going to give it a quick cleaning with some, again, cotton swab and water. That's it. All right, and here are all the parts all cleaned up and looking great. And they're all laid out, ready to go. It looks like the most complex 3D puzzle you've ever worked on, except they're all microscopic pieces and there's no picture on the box. But other than that, should be easy. All right, so now we're gonna go back to my crystal tool and let's put the crystal on the case. And first thing is we need to get the crystal itself first onto the case before we put the ring on. So the first thing we're gonna do here is just press this on carefully with this tool. And I'm also putting some plastic to protect it from underneath and on top. Now the parts on this tool are aluminum, which is already a soft metal, but with gold it's so soft I really need to protect it to make sure that we don't leave any marks on it. All right, so we're not really pushing down hard here, we're just getting it into place. It just fits over a protrusion on the case and then the bezel goes over it to hold it down. This is the bezel here. So let's just get that on here. And same thing, we're going to use the tool, again, the same way to press it into place. All right, there we go. Looking good. All right, so we're going to get started on the movement. And what I'm doing here is I'm putting some 8200 mainspring grease onto some tweezers that I've actually set up with chamois cloth on them. And then I just run it across all of the mainspring to lube up the mainspring, basically, to give it a light film of the 8200 grease. All right, now let's get this into the barrel. So I'm going to use my mainspring winders here in one of those custom made 3D printed parts holder, movement holder that I mentioned earlier. Okay, and we are going to just wind it in here carefully. Right, and at the very end, there's a kind of a fork of a tail, so we carefully push it in and then finish winding it. All right, and then we're going to carefully take off the part that I'm holding here with tweezers to hold down the mainspring in place. Because if you just pull it up, the mainspring will come flying out, and then you have to be chasing it around and untangling it. It's not fun. Ask me how I know. You can see right in here that it's ready to go. It's looking good. It's nice and wound in there. So now we're going to put a little bit of, again, 8200. Actually, two things. We're going to put some automatic grease for automatic movements on the barrel wall itself. We're going to use some of this braking grease that is used for automatic movements, and that it allows the mainspring to slide around the edge, but it gives it enough braking power that it gives it some strength in the wind. And this is important for automatic movements because they're constantly winding up. So it has to have the ability to kind of move a little bit. Again, that's 8200 grease in the barrel, and now let's pop it in place. Perfect. There you go. We're good to go. All right, now let's get the arbor in place. And I like to put the arbor onto a arbor vise. I haven't had a lot of luck holding the arbors with tweezers because they have a tendency to kind of pop out and fly away. So this is just a safer way, and it also allows me to turn the arbor once it's inside the mainspring and make sure that it's properly caught onto the tooth that's on the arbor that actually holds the mainspring and spins it around. There you go. All right, so let's put a little bit of a HP 1300 oil here on the arbor. And let's close it up and use this barrel closing tool that makes it really easy to just pop it closed. All right, just press down. There you go. Nice click. Good to go. And I'm just going to put a tiny bit of 1300 there on the arbor. Now we're putting it in the movement, and now let's put on the barrel bridge over the barrel. There we go. Let's get that screwed down. So this is the center wheel. We're going to put some HP 1300 on that. All right, and just let's put that in place. Now this is the third wheel, and you'll notice that it's a double wheel that's connected. And this is a little bit tricky because you have to put these in place and then slide the bridge over the bottom wheel, but under the top wheel. So you got to kind of mess with it a little bit. And this is the fourth wheel. And finally, that is the escape wheel that we're putting in. And this is the, you have to make sure that the pivots are seated properly into the jewels. And then here's the bridge, the train bridge. And you notice how I'm putting in the top end and I'm sliding the bottom in to get between the two wheels there. It's a little bit awkward, but it does seat together fairly nicely. We just got to make sure that those pivots are in the jewels, because the last thing you want to do is tighten that bridge down without all of those pivots in the jewels, because you will break the pivots off and then you've got a broken watch. You got to find new wheels. Not great. All right. I'm just going to tighten this down here. There we go. Now we've got it in place. I just kind of put the screw in very lightly and then, got those set in there. And now I can tighten it all the way. All right. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the sweep second-hand bridge on, but I'm not going to put the sweep second pinion in. And the reason for that is for these particular Omegas, the spring that holds that sweep second hand actually adds some additional friction that I know it does. It takes away about an additional 10 degrees of amplitude when you put that into a watch. And I wanted to make sure that everything is good before I put the pinion in, because I don't want to mistake that reduction in amplitude that I know will come from that spring before I can test all of the wheels. So it doesn't have to be in there. It's not a necessary piece for the rest of it to work. So we're going to leave it out for right now. And then I'm just adding some HP 1300, which is what this medium viscosity red grease is. And I'm using the automatic oiler here to do that, but I also use the regular oiler to do that as well. Now this is the crown wheel. This is the part that actually spins when you turn the crown on the watch and actually passes that energy to the mainspring to wind it up. And that little cover is called the crown wheel core. Okay, let's get the screw in there and let's tighten that down. Now this is Lubetta 105. It's a lubrication and cleaner in one. And what I did is I put that reversing wheel in there, which is the ratchet wheel that has the two wheels on it sandwiched together. And that helped to clean it and lubricate it at the same time. And actually, I'm going to put the click in here. And this is the part that keeps the mainspring from unwinding. So there is a spring here. And this part that spins around, I'm just tightening up the screw. And then I'm going to put that spring in place. It's kind of sitting underneath the click. This is the click spring, and now we're just going to set it into place. There we go. And that will give it the tension that will hold up against the ratchet wheel that we're going to put here in a minute. Again, putting some HP 1300 and then putting that ratchet wheel on. There we go. Okay, everything looks like it's running smoothly. All the wheels are spinning nicely. So let's get the movement turned over and let's get the keyless works in so that we can use the crown to wind the watch. All right, so the first part that's going in here is the winding pinion. And this is the setting lever. This is the part that actually changes the watch from winding the watch to setting the time. And I'm putting 9504 grease on it. It's that blue grease that I was putting on there. And you'll see that I use that primarily in the keyless works area. And here's the winding pinion. It's going into the slot. And here is the clutch wheel. Okay, we can put this in place and we can actually slide the stem in with the crown. And again, I'm using the same 9504 grease in there. All right, there we go. We want to make sure to put the setting lever in the right spot there. There we go. All right, let's put some more grease on this particular pivot is where the yoke is going to sit. And I'm actually going to put a little bit more of that 9504 on all the points where there's metal to metal friction. And this is the pressure spring that holds down the setting lever. So we get that in place and screw that down. Okay, so now let's put some grease on the clutch wheel where the yoke sits, just to give it a little bit of grease there. And then let's put the yoke in. All right, there we go. Set it in place. And now we're going to put in the yoke spring, and I always hold it down with another tool when I'm putting it in place because, like I mentioned before, that sucker will fly away. All right, I'm putting a little bit of grease where that spring is touching the yoke. Kind of working that in a little bit. I'm putting a little bit of HP 1300 in the spots where I will be putting in the intermediate wheel, the minute wheel, and then the cannon pinion. All right, there's the intermediate wheel. This is the minute wheel. And then we're going to put in this plate over, which is actually the lever spring, the setting lever spring. Put that in place and then screw it down. It's a little bit harder to work with these wooden tweezers than the normal tweezers, but I still wanted to use them because I didn't want to scratch up this beautiful movement. So, it's a price to pay. And then we're going to use a little bit of Rodico to clean up some of this excess oil and grease that's on there. And I'm actually I forgot to put a little bit of grease on at the point where the setting lever spring is actually touching the setting lever. There we go. We're going to work that back and forth. Okay. And there you go. It's winding up the mainspring. And then now when you pull it, it's setting the hands. So we're good to go. Let's turn it back over. All right, so this is the pallet fork. And I didn't put the pallet fork in the cleaning machine because the pallet fork, those pallet jewels are held in by shellac, and the chemicals can actually soften it up. And I did, I'm always careful not to do that, so I put it in a different solution, which is called One Dip, that doesn't affect the shellac in any way. So I don't put like I said, I don't put the pallet fork in with the rest of the movement when I clean it. Now I'm going to carefully tighten this up after we make sure that the pivot is in the jewel. And then let's get the balance wheel in here and let's take a look and see if everything is working as it should. All right, so we're getting it in here. And okay, it's kind of starting up, but that doesn't look right to me. That is not nearly as much amplitude as there should be to the balance wheel. Something's going on. I must have missed something. Let's see if we can figure it out. Okay, I found it. We've got way too much side shake in this pallet fork. If you look at the pivot that's sticking out of the jewel, you can actually see it moving back and forth. And that's way too much. So let's get that jewel out of there. And unfortunately, it broke. I mean, it's okay. It was a bad jewel anyway. I wasn't going to use it, but I was going to use the jewel to know what size jewel to replace it with. So now we got to get creative. So we got to figure out what's the right jewel. So luckily for me, I have a jewel gauge that's part of my site's jeweling tool that actually has different size jewels in it where we can test the pivot and get the right size for the inner dimension of the jewel. Let's do that. So let's pop the pallet fork on here and let's test it out. So we're going to put it into a 0.09 millimeter hole. And actually that looks pretty good. It's actually standing up and moving, has freedom of movement. Let's go down one. Won't even go in that hole. It's too tight. That's too small. And then this one is 0.1. And that one's too loose because actually the metal fork end is touching the metal on the gauge there. So that's too big. So we know the inner dimension is 0.09. So now what I'm doing is I'm using the reamers from the same jeweling set that come in the sizes that are equivalent to the jewels. So the first one that I tested there was a 7.9, which is 0.79 millimeter. This one is 89, which is 0.89 millimeter. And this one looks right. And let's just check the 99 one, the 0.99 millimeter one, to see if it's too big. And then we'll know that it's 0.89. Yep. So the actual size of the jewel is 0.9. So we're looking for a 990 jewel from sites. And luckily for me, I have some jewels here that I can go and get the right jewel. I'm looking for a plate jewel there that is a 990. All right, let's get it in place. There it is. All right, and there is our little replacement jewel. Perfect. Unfortunately, it's pretty filthy, so we need to clean it. So I'm gonna throw it into the one dip, that same solution that I was using to clean the pallet fork, and we'll get it cleaned up. Get it in there, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put it onto this watchmaker's paper here, and let's use a leather buff to clean it off. I'm gonna rub it against the watchmaker paper here, and kind of rub it in and rub it off and get it nice and clean. All right, looks good. Now let's get it into the pallet bridge there. Perfect. And I'm going to use my Oya jeweling tool here, and I'm going to gently get it into place. And doesn't take much, just carefully push it into place. Okay, looking good. There you go. Now let's get it into place and let's check it out. Okay, make sure that's seated in there, make sure the pallet fork is in the jewel properly. Okay, looks good. It's got good freedom of movement. Let's get it screwed in. right, I'm going to put a little bit of wind into the watch just to make sure that the power is going all the way to the pallet fork. That looks good. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to oil the pallet fork, and it's a dab of 9415 grease on the end of the pallet jewel, on the exit pallet jewel there, and I'm going to run it through 3 teeth, and I'm going to do this 5 times because there's 15 teeth. And then I'm going to kind of run it through a couple of times through the whole cycle and make sure that that grease goes to all the different teeth onto the escape wheel. All right, and moment of truth here. Let's get this balance icon here, and let's see if it... Oh, look at that. Now it just kicked right up. I didn't have to force it. I didn't have to give it a twist. It just started right up. There we go. Now we've seated it. Looks good. Much better. All right. Let's get this screwed down, and let's put a little bit of oil on the different jewels, and let's see what we got. Much better. It's running much better. Okay, so let's open this up here and let's take out the cap jewel on the balance wheel. And we're going to carefully open up this ink block setting that holds this cap jewel setting in place. And you know, I really should be using my thinner tweezers here. Let me see. I really need to be using my thinner tweezers, but I think I can get away. All right, I'm going to get it into it. Oh, I dropped it. It's right there. You see it? It fell, and it's right on top of the other jewel. California. All right. I'm going to get the right tweezers, and I'm going to play operation here. All right, ready? We're going to carefully stop the balance wheel and carefully pull in, put up the jewel through there. There we go. We got it. All right. Yeah, it's a good thing I was good at operation when I was a kid. All right, and then let's get the rest of the setting out. See how easy it comes out when you use the right tweezers? All right. Now, you'll notice what I found is that there's a tiny little divot in the cap jewel. Well, that will cause significant difference in the amplitude between dial up and dial down. So what I'm doing here is I'm using this tool to measure the width of the jewel so I can get a replacement. And it's 120, so 1.2 millimeters is the size of the jewel, and I happen to have that as well. And then I can clean that up and then get it installed. All right. Again, we'll use the leather buff here to kind of buff it out, and it does look a lot better. Okay, and we're going to put a spot of 9010 oil on here. And luckily, this particular jewel has kind of a little border, so it tells you that's how much oil you should put in there should you reach the border, so a little helper. So once you get that oil on there, then you put the cap on. Alright, and the capillary action will actually hold the jewel in place, and we can put it back into the movement. There we go. Alright, we carefully get this closed. This is the ink block setting. All right, so let's get some oil on the jewels. So we're using 9010 on the escape wheel and on the third wheel and the fourth wheel. We're not putting any oil on the sweep second pinion jewel because actually that sweep second pinion is not in there yet. So we will put that in later. All right, let's get the movement turned over and we can oil the jewels on the other side. Again, same thing, 9010 on the escape wheel, third wheel and fourth wheel. And here we can actually see the center wheel. So we will put the HP 1300 on that. And then I will open up the ink block setting on this side of the balance wheel and get that cleaned up. And let me get the right tweezers this time. There we go. All right, just drop that into the cleaner and let's get the jewel cleaned up. And again, same thing here. We're putting 9010 on that jewel and then putting the other piece de chaton back onto the jewel. And then we'll get in the movement. Okay, once we get this on here, and then we'll take this over to the Timegrapher and actually see how we did. I can tell that it's definitely running a lot better than it was before we fixed the pallet fork jewel. There was definitely an issue. Now, there is an issue here that I noticed, and that is that the hairspring was coning upwards. So, and that's usually caused by the hairspring stud being mounted too high. So we're just going to unscrew that screw that holds that stud in place, and I'm just going to push it down slightly, and that will lower the hairspring and level it out. Because what you want to make sure that the hairspring is nice and flat. There we go, that's a lot better. Okay, so now that I think we've got everything in a good place, let's get that sweep second pinion back in. I put it in the proper place here, so let's take off the bridge. And then once we take off the bridge, we're going to slide the sweep second pinion back in here. Right, I'm just making a slight adjustment to that spring. Just want to make sure that it's not putting too much pressure onto the sweep second pinion, and just tighten it down. And then we'll put a little bit of HP 1300 where that where the pinion goes, and then we'll slide the pinion back in. There you go, perfect. And you notice the balance wheel started up there, and that's because it kind of aligned the wheel, but it really shouldn't start back up until this bridge is in place. So let's get the bridge in place. Let's make sure that those pivots are in the jewels properly, and let's get it tightened down. This really is a pretty movement. I really love the work that Omega did during this period where they put this copper finish on the movement. It just looks beautiful. All right, and here's a little bit of HP 1300 for the top of the sweep second pinion. So a restored watch that doesn't keep accurate time is just a nice looking bracelet. So the next part is all about performance. We're going to turn this beautiful object back into a precision instrument, right? And the first stop here is a Timegrapher. And this machine basically listens to the tick-tock of the watch and shows me vital signs. The first thing looking for is beat rate. This is a caliber 503. It should have a beat rate of 19,800 vibrations per hour with a lift angle of 49. Those are the two numbers on the right, so that's correct. The second is the amplitude, which is how far the balance wheel is swinging. And the amplitude is now strong and consistent in both the dial up and dial down positions, which tells me that replacing that worn cap jewel did its job. Third is the beat error, which measures how symmetrical the tick and tock are to each other. And anything less than 1 millisecond is great, and this is 0.1 milliseconds now, so yeah, that's perfect. So you can see where we were when we started in the top part there with the different positions as we're moving it through, comparing it to where we are right now. And after just some final adjustments, I've got it dialed in here pretty great. I tested it in 4 separate positions: dial up, dial down, crown left, and crown down. The lines on the Timegrapher you can see are straight, parallel. The daily rate is Well, it's hovering around 0 seconds a day in all 4 positions. 0 for a 65-year-old mechanical watch. That isn't just exceptional, it's practically showing off. I think this talks to the quality of the workmanship of the Omega movements of this period. And maybe I did a good job with my service, so that's helpful. All right, so let's move on. Let's finish putting this back together. All right, so I'm going to put back together the automatic movement here. I'm putting in the post that actually holds the oscillating weight here, screwing that in place. We've got the reverser in right next to it, and now we're going to put the click in that fits onto this little spring here. Got to make sure to get that on correctly. So let's tighten it down, make sure the pivot's in place. Okay. All right, let's put these wheels in. And this is the ratchet driving wheel. And the other wheel is actually a reduction wheel. This one here. And that bigger wheel actually drives the ratchet wheel on the main plate, which then drives the winding of the watch. All right, let's get this plate on here. Get it screwed down. And this little stop click, we got to make sure this spring is on it properly, because this is what keeps the wheels from turning backwards. There you go. That's right. All right, let's tighten down. And let's put it on the watch. All right, putting a little bit of HP 1300 on the pivots of the different wheels here. Same for this little click. And the reverser. And this is the other pivot of the reverser. All right, let's get it on the movement. I'm just going to slightly hold it down and turn the crown, and that will kind of engage the gears. There we go. And then we can tighten it down. There you can see everything spinning. Perfect. All right, we've got that in place. Looks good. Let's just put the final oil on the other side here. On all those same pivots. Perfect. All right, looks good. Okay, let's turn it back over so we can get to work on the date mechanism here. Again, some HP 1300. This is where we're going to put in the cannon pinion. We got to be careful when we're putting the cannon pinion in here. We want to make sure we're not pinching the teeth of the minute wheel underneath when we push it down. Okay, so this is the Maltese cross, and this is a date finger wheel. And these are the two things that make the date wheel turn, the big ring with the date on it. And now we're going to put the hour wheel over the cannon pinion. And here's a date ring. Is it our wheel I just mentioned? Okay, hold on a second. This isn't right. I think it's upside down. Hold on, let me turn it over. Okay, let's test it out. Make sure the date finger comes around and moves that. Yep, okay, now it's right. Yep, it was upside down. And this is the date indicator guard, so it goes over everything, kind of holds all those pieces in place, and we want to push up on this little spring here that actually holds up against the date ring. And that's what actually gives the pressure to the date ring to make it snap to the date instead of kind of sliding into the next day. And just like that. Good. And I'm just going to add a little bit of HP 1300. I'm going to add it to a couple of the teeth and where that date finger is. Give it a couple of turns and then add a little bit more just to kind of put a little bit of oil on the day wheel. All right, so let's loosen up these dial screws so that we can put the dial back on here. All right, so let's put the dial on here, and let's make sure that those dial feet are into those holes, and we can tighten them up. Hold on a second, that's not in all the way. Hold on, there we go. Now it's in all the way. Now let's tighten it up. Okay. Here we go on the other side. Okay, and now we can get the hands on here. So I'm going to change the date so I know that it's midnight, and then I will put the hour hand on here and press it into place. Trying to be careful here because what I want to make sure is that I get it so that the date changes as close to midnight as possible. Nothing worse than if your date doesn't change until like 1 o'clock. It's not okay. So getting it the minute hand here at the right at midnight and pressing it down as well. And let's test it out. Make sure that it does it right at midnight. Okay, there we go. Flipped over. Yep, right at midnight. Perfect. Looks good. All right, and let's get the second hand on here. Give it a light press. We got to be careful here because this second hand is directly tied to that sweep second pinion, which the only thing that's holding it down is that jewel. And if you push that too hard, it'll push the jewel out of place. But there we go. Looking good. So let's just vacuum the inside of this, make sure that it's clean and blow off any dust. And then we'll get this cased up. So let me take off the crown here so that we can put the case on. Just pushing in the setting lever, popping the crown up, and then we can get the movement cased up. All right. The crystal looks great, nice and clear. Case looks good. I'm just turning it over. Make sure it's seated correctly, and then we're going to put the crown in place. Okay, so let's put the case clamps in place and screw them down. All right, and now this is a new winding stem. And when you buy them, they come too long so that you can then set them to the right length. So once I get this oscillating weight in here and finish this up, we need to cut that crown down. You can see how far it's sticking out. We need to take care of that crown. Okay, so just putting in the oscillating weight here. And then this piece is what holds it in place. Just slide it in and screw it down. There you go. I'm just going to put a little bit of HP 1300 there on the pivot of the oscillating weight. so that it winds it nice and smoothly. And it's spinning around nicely and nothing is impeding it, so we're good. All right, so I'm using the calipers here to measure the distance between the case and the crown. And I got there 4.47 millimeters. I'm going to put the stem into a pin vise so that I can remove the crown, and then we can trim it up. Okay, get that measurement. I'll mark it with a Sharpie, and then I will cut just shy of that mark. There we go. Okay, and now I'm using a diamond stone to get rid of the burr on the edge of the part that I just cut off the stem. Sure that it's the right length, then I'll add a drop of Loctite to make sure that the crown doesn't come off. You know, this watch was more than just Omega competing with Rolex. It was a statement that a tough, water-resistant watch could also be incredibly elegant. It helps set the standard for the kind of watch we all take for granted today, but more than that, this specific watch tells a human story. A story that started when a man walked into a shop in Santiago, Chile, and walked out with his new timepiece. We breaking down this movement and bringing it back to peak performance. You know, we're honoring the skill of the watchmaker who first built it over 60 years ago, but we're also preserving a piece of family history. This watch we started on a bench as a beautiful object is now ready to be returned to my friend. Its heart beating strong, ready for a whole new lifetime of service, ticking steadily into the future. Thank you for joining me on this restoration, and a big thank you to my dear friend Christian for giving me the opportunity to work on this incredible watch. The story of this watch is now ready for its next chapter, but there are countless others out there, each with its own history, just waiting to be rediscovered. If you enjoyed watching this piece of horological history, get the service it deserves, please like and subscribe and join us on Patreon. And I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. Maybe you have a family heirloom with a story, or there's a vintage model you'd love to see me revive. Let me know, and I'll see you next time here in the Watchmaker Studio.